I was 31 years old when I found the photograph. It was tucked inside the lining of my mother's old suitcase. A family I didn't recognize, standing in my living room. Same fireplace. Same wallpaper. Same window overlooking the same oak tree. But different furniture. Different faces. Different children. And written on the back in handwriting I didn't recognize, home. Finally ours. September 1987. My family moved into that house in September 1988. Exactly 1 year later. I have been pulling that thread ever since. And I am still not sure I should have. My mother was the kind of woman who never threw anything away. Not out of sentimentality. Out of precision. She believed that everything had a purpose, and discarding something before that purpose revealed itself was a form of arrogance. I used to think that was wisdom. Now I think it was guilt. She passed in February. Quietly, the way she did everything. A Tuesday morning, her own bed, her hands folded like she'd arranged them herself. I flew home to Ohio 3 days later to help my brother Daniel sort through the house. The suitcase was in the back of her bedroom closet. Old. Dark green canvas with brass buckles gone soft with age. I almost left it for the donation pile. Something made me open it instead. Inside, folded clothes from another decade. A broken watch. 3 books with cracked spines. And underneath everything, sewn carefully into the silk lining with small, deliberate stitches, a photograph. She had hidden it inside the suitcase lining. Not placed. Not stored. Hidden. Deliberately concealed with needle and thread by hands that knew exactly what they were doing. I stood in her bedroom for a long time before I turned it over. A family. Father, mother, 3 children arranged in front of a fireplace. Our fireplace. The same pale brick. The same oak mantel. The same crack in the upper left corner that my father always said he'd fix and never did. But the furniture was wrong. A navy sofa where ours was cream. A round coffee table where ours was rectangular. Curtains I didn't recognize framing the same window that looked out over the same oak tree I had climbed every summer of my childhood. Different family. Different belongings. Same house. I turned it over. Home. Finally ours. September 1987. We moved into that house in September 1988. I sat down on my mother's bed. The mattress still held the shape of her. I sat in that shape and looked at strangers standing in my living room and tried to find a version of this that made simple sense. Hidden clue number 1, the crack in the upper left corner of the fireplace. My father always said he'd fix it. He never did. Remember why he might have chosen not to. I brought the photograph downstairs. Daniel was in the kitchen making coffee. He looked up when I walked in and immediately looked back down. Not the reflex of someone who hadn't seen it before. The reflex of someone who had. Daniel. He kept his eyes on the coffee. Daniel, look at this. He turned slowly. Looked at the photograph. Looked at me. And said, "Where did you find that?" Same words Aunt Ruth had said to me about my father's box 3 years earlier. Not, "What is that?" Not, "I've never seen that before." "Where did you find it?" "The suitcase lining," I said. She sewed it in. Daniel set down his coffee cup very carefully. "How long have you known?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Which was its own answer. Daniel. How long? Since I was 19, he said quietly. I was 6 years younger than Daniel. He had been carrying this for 12 years. What is it? I said. What does it mean? He looked at the photograph one more time. Then he looked at me with the expression of someone who has been waiting a long time for a door to finally open. Sit down, he said. I'll make more coffee. This is going to take a while. He reached into his jacket pocket. Pulled out his own photograph. Same house. Same fireplace. But this one had names written on the back. A father. A mother. And 3 children. None of whom were named Daniel. None of whom were named after me. Hidden clue number 2, Daniel already had his own photograph. He didn't find it just now. He has been carrying it in his jacket pocket. He came to this house today prepared for this conversation. The family in that photograph, Daniel said slowly. They didn't move out of this house. He set his photograph on the table next to mine. They disappeared. The coffee went cold between us. Neither of us touched it. Disappeared. I turned that word over and over while Daniel refilled the coffee neither of us was drinking. People don't just disappear from houses. They leave. They sell. They move on. They don't disappear. Tell me everything, I said. Daniel sat down across from me. He looked like a man setting down something very heavy he'd been carrying for a very long time. I found out by accident, he said. I was 19. Home from college for the summer. Dad asked me to clean out the garage and I found a box he'd missed. Inside was a folder. Legal documents. Property transfer records. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. The house wasn't bought, Mara. It was transferred. Signed over. For $1. $1. That's what you pay, Daniel said quietly, when the real transaction isn't money. I looked down at the 2 photographs on the table. The family and mine. The names on the back of Daniel's. Who were they? I said. Daniel unfolded a piece of paper from his jacket. Worn soft at the creases. Read and refold many times. The Calloway family, he said. Richard and Susan Calloway. 3 kids, James, Peter, and a daughter named Claire. Claire. My middle name is Claire. My mother told me I was named after her grandmother. I didn't say that out loud yet. I just filed it in the part of my mind that was quietly building a picture I wasn't ready to see fully. What happened to them, I said. That's what I spent 12 years trying to find out, Daniel said. He had started with property records. The transfer was dated August 31, 1988. Our family moved in September 4, 1988. 4 days between the Calloway family signing over their home for $1 and our parents carrying boxes through the front door. Dad's name is on the transfer document, Daniel said. As the receiving party. But also, he paused. As the notary. Our father had notarized his own property transfer. Which was illegal. Which meant he had either done it himself knowing it was illegal, or someone with significant power had helped him do it and look away. I confronted Dad, Daniel said. I looked up sharply. When? I was 22. I'd been sitting on it for 3 years and I couldn't anymore. What did he say? Daniel was quiet for a moment. He said, the Calloways were not good people. What happened to them was not our fault. And what we have now is ours. Don't dig, Daniel. Some ground swallows you if you dig too deep. And you stopped? I was 22, he said. And he looked at me like he'd aged 10 years just from the question. So yes. I stopped. He looked at me steadily. But you won't. He was right. I drove to the county records office that afternoon. Pulled the property history on our house going back to 1970. The Calloways had purchased it in 1981. 7 years. Young family. 3 kids enrolled in local schools. And then, August 1988. Gone. I requested the transfer document Daniel had described. The clerk printed it without looking up. I stood at the counter and read every line. Our father's signature was there. Neat. Careful. Exactly as I remembered it from birthday cards and school permission slips. But the Calloway signatures, Richard and Susan Calloway, signing away their home for $1, were witnessed by a single notary. A notary whose stamp I recognized. Because it was the same stamp on my own birth certificate. The same notary had witnessed the property transfer and certified my birth record. Both in the same month. September 1988. I photographed everything and sat in my car in the parking lot. The oak tree. The fireplace. The crack my father never fixed. Claire. My middle name was Claire. I called Daniel. The notary on the transfer document, I said. Did you ever look into who they were? A pause. Yes, he said. And? Mara. His voice had changed. Careful now. The way it gets when he's about to say something he can't unsay. The notary wasn't a person. It was a position. A county clerk position. Held in 1988 by a woman named Susan Calloway. First twist, Susan Calloway had notarized her own family's property transfer. The mother had signed away her own home. Witnessed her own signature. Certified her own disappearance. This wasn't something done to the Calloway family. Susan Calloway had done it herself. Deliberately. Legally. With full knowledge of what she was signing. Which meant the Calloways hadn't disappeared. They had vanished on purpose. And our parents had known exactly where they went. I sat in that parking lot until the sun started going down. Watching people walk in and out of the county building with their ordinary questions and their ordinary lives. Inside my chest something very old and very certain was quietly coming apart. I had one more question I needed answered before dark. I drove to the one place I hadn't been yet. The place Daniel hadn't mentioned. Which meant either he hadn't thought of it. Or he had thought of it and decided I shouldn't go. I drove to the house. Our house. The one we'd grown up in. It had been on the market since my mother passed. Empty now. Lockbox on the door. I still had the key from when Daniel and I had cleared it out. I let myself in. Stood in the hallway. Looked at the living room. The fireplace. The crack in the upper left corner. I crossed the room and looked at it closely for the first time in my life. It wasn't a crack from settling foundations or careless living. It was deliberate. Initials carved carefully into the brick. RCSCJPC Richard. Susan. James. Peter. And one more set of initials underneath. Smaller. Carved more carefully than the others. CC Claire Calloway. Cyclone Part 3, The Truth Unravels and the Second Twist. CC Claire Calloway. I stood in front of that fireplace for a long time. My fingertips still on the initials like I could read something from the brick itself. My middle name was Claire. Given to me by a mother who said it was a family name. A family name. I took a photograph of the initials. Then I sat down on the floor of the empty living room where I had opened Christmas presents and learned to read and fallen asleep watching television, and I called Daniel. He answered on the first ring. Like he'd been waiting. There are initials carved in the fireplace, I said. 4 sets. Richard, Susan, James, Peter. And a 5th one. CC. Complete silence. Daniel. I know, he said quietly. You've seen them. Yes. When? The night Dad died, he said. He asked me to come downstairs. Just me. It was 2 a.m. Mom was asleep. He took me to the fireplace and showed me the initials. And then he told me something he said he should have told us both years ago. I pressed the phone harder against my ear. The empty house breathed around me. He knew the Calloways, Daniel said. Not casually. Not as neighbors. Richard Calloway was Dad's older brother. The room tilted. The Calloways were our family, Daniel said. Richard was our uncle. Susan was our aunt. James, Peter, and Claire were our cousins. I looked at the initials. CC Claire Calloway. My middle name wasn't from our great-grandmother. It was from a cousin I never knew existed. Why? I said. Why did they leave? Why did we never know them? Daniel exhaled slowly. Because they were in danger, he said. And Dad was the only person who could help them disappear. Richard Calloway had been a federal witness. A mid-level accountant at a Chicago firm who had accidentally uncovered something he was never meant to see. A money laundering operation. Significant. Organized. Connected to people who considered problems like Richard Calloway entirely disposable. He had gone to the FBI in the spring of 1988. By summer they had told him the truth. The operation was bigger than they'd initially assessed. The people involved had reach inside law enforcement. Witness protection was compromised. Richard's family wasn't safe anywhere their names were attached. They needed to vanish completely, Daniel said. New names. New state. New everything. But they needed someone they trusted absolutely to hold the last piece of their old life. The house. Richard couldn't sell it, Daniel said. A sale creates records. Paper trails. Interested parties. So he transferred it to Dad for $1. And Dad moved us in. Kept it in the family without it looking like it. And every year, he stopped. Every year what? I said. Every year Dad got a letter, Daniel said quietly. No return address. Different postmarks. Just a single line. Telling him they were okay. I closed my eyes. Yellow envelopes. Annual signals. Fathers carrying secrets to protect the people they loved. I thought about my mother's suitcase. The photograph sewn into the lining. She hadn't hidden it out of shame. She'd hidden it out of protection. If anyone ever found it, they'd see only a family photograph. Nothing traceable. Nothing dangerous. Just a memory she couldn't bring herself to destroy. Do you know where they went? I said. No, Daniel said. Does anyone? A pause. Longer than the others. Daniel. There's one more thing, he said. Dad told me the night he died. He made me promise not to tell you until you were ready. Until you found the photograph yourself. My father had engineered this too. Like my father's box. Like the cassette tape. A breadcrumb trail designed for the child most likely to follow it. Tell me, I said. The last letter came 8 months ago, Daniel said. After 15 years of silence. It wasn't a single line this time. It was an address. Second twist, Claire Calloway has been looking for us, Daniel said. She found Dad's obituary online. She's been trying to find a way to reach us ever since. Claire. The fifth set of initials. The cousin whose name my mother had given me like a secret kept in plain sight. She's alive, I said. Not a question. A recalibration. She's alive, Daniel said. All of them are. Richard and Susan retired 2 years ago. James is a doctor in Portland. Peter teaches high school in Vermont. And Claire, he paused. Claire has been living 40 minutes from this house for the last 3 years. I stood up slowly. Looked at the fireplace. At the initials carved by children who had to leave everything they knew overnight. Who had carved their names into brick because brick lasts. Because they needed something of themselves to remain even when they couldn't. She doesn't know I exist, I said. She knows you exist, Daniel said. She just doesn't know your name. Because Dad never told them Mom was pregnant when they left. I had been born 6 weeks after the Calloways vanished. Born into a house still warm with another family's life. Named after a cousin who didn't know I existed. The address Daniel, I said. Are you sure? Send it. My phone buzzed. A street address. 40 minutes away. I looked around the empty living room one last time. The fireplace. The oak tree through the window. The wallpaper my mother had chosen carefully to make someone else's house feel like ours. She hadn't been erasing the Callaways. She had been preserving them. Keeping the house exactly as it deserved to be kept. For the family who had trusted us with it. I walked out. Got in my car. And drove toward the address. 40 minutes had never felt so long. Or so necessary. The address led me to a small neighborhood on the east side of the city, quiet streets. Old trees. The kind of neighborhood that has been the same for 40 years and is proud of it. I parked outside a pale yellow house with a front porch and a garden that someone tended carefully. I sat in the car for 20 minutes, engine off, hands in my lap. I had spent the entire drive rehearsing what I would say. Every version sounded wrong. Hi, I'm the cousin you never knew existed. Your parents trusted my father with your childhood home. My mother named me after you. None of it was the right first sentence. There is no right first sentence for this. I got out of the car anyway. The porch light was on even though it wasn't dark yet. A detail that for some reason made me feel better. People who leave porch lights on in the early evening are people who expect someone might need to find them. I knocked. Footsteps inside. A pause at the door, the particular pause of someone checking through the peephole. Then the door opened. She was my height, dark hair shot through with early gray at the temples. My mother's cheekbones. My father's careful eyes. She looked at me the way I had looked at Naomi in the coffee shop, like reading a book she'd always known existed. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. Then she said, "You have Richard's nose." "My dad always said that too," I said. "About himself." She stepped back from the door. "Come in," she said. "I just made coffee." Her house was warm, books everywhere. Photographs on every surface. The comfortable disorder of someone who has finally stopped moving and allowed themselves to settle. I looked at the photographs. The family I didn't know but somehow recognized, Richard and Susan, younger, laughing at something outside the frame. 3 children at various ages, James, Peter, Claire herself, and on the mantelpiece above her fireplace, a photograph I did recognize, our house, the living room, the fireplace. Taken from the doorway, the way you photograph a place you're memorizing before you leave it. "Dad took that the last morning," Claire said from behind me. "He said he needed to remember it exactly as it was. He wouldn't let us change anything before we left. Every piece of furniture. Every curtain. He wanted it left exactly right." I turned to face her. "That's why my mother kept it the same," I said slowly. "All those years. The furniture. The curtains. Everything. I always thought it was just her taste." Claire shook her head gently. "She was keeping a promise," she said. "Your father asked her to. He told her, keep it like they left it. In case they ever came back." My mother had maintained another family's home for 36 years, not out of obligation, out of love, for a family she had never met, for a promise made by a man she trusted completely. I sat down, Claire sat across from me, and we did what people do when they have 36 years to cover and only one afternoon to begin. We talked. She told me about the night they left. How her parents woke them at midnight and told them to pack one bag each. How her father stood in the living room doorway for a long time before he turned off the lights. How her mother held all 3 children in the driveway and said, "We are not losing each other. Everything else is just things." "I carved the initials the week before we left," Claire said. "I was 8 years old. I thought if I put our names in the wall they couldn't erase us. Even if someone else lived there." She looked at me steadily. "Your mother found them the first week," she said. "Your father wrote to my father about it. He said she stood at the fireplace for a long time. Then she told your father, these stay. No one fills them in. No one paints over them. She said, this family deserves to have their name somewhere." I couldn't speak for a moment. My mother, who never threw anything away, who sewed a photograph into a suitcase lining with needle and thread, who named her youngest daughter after a child she'd never met, who kept another family's curtains and furniture and fireplace crack for 36 years, she had been honoring them the whole time. In the quiet, precise, unannounced way she did everything. "She knew about me?" I said. "Your father told my father when you were born," Claire said. My father wrote back one word. She smiled. Perfect. I looked down at my hands, the same hands my father had, the same nose as Richard Calloway. My mother's cheekbones on Claire's face across from me. We were made of the same material, separated by 36 years of necessary silence, sitting in a warm house on a quiet street with cold coffee between us. Hidden clue number 1 revealed, the crack in the fireplace. My father never fixed it because my mother wouldn't let him. It was load-bearing. Not structurally, but in every way that mattered. Hidden clue number 2 revealed, Daniel came to the house that morning already carrying his photograph. Already prepared. He had called Claire the week before. He had told her someone would be coming. He had been arranging this for months. He just needed me to find the photograph first. To come to it myself. Because he knew me well enough to know I had to find my own way to the door. I called Daniel from Claire's driveway an hour later. You called her, I said. Last month, he said. You arranged this. I created the conditions, he said carefully. You did the rest. I leaned against my car, the porch light was still on behind me. Claire had made me take the photograph from her mantelpiece. It belongs in that house, she said. It always did. I looked at it now in my hands, our living room. Their living room, the fireplace with the crack that nobody fixed, the curtains my mother kept for 36 years. Richard and Susan Calloway flew in 3 weeks later. James came from Portland. Peter drove from Vermont. We had dinner at Claire's house. 8 people around a table that wasn't quite big enough. Nobody minded. Richard Calloway looked at me across the table and said, "Your father was the best man I ever knew." He kept everything, I said. He kept more than the house, Richard said. He kept his word. For 36 years he kept his word. I thought about my father, the man who notarized an illegal document to protect his brother, who moved his pregnant wife into another family's home and asked her to keep it exactly as it was, who raised 2 children in a borrowed life without ever letting them feel the weight of what it cost him. He had carried that weight so we wouldn't have to. After dinner Claire walked me to my car. We stood in the driveway in the cold. Can I ask you something? I said. Yes. Do you ever resent it? What your parents did? The life you lost? She was quiet for a moment, looked up at the sky the way people do when they're choosing words carefully. I lost a house, she said finally. I kept my family. My mother was right. Everything else is just things. I drove home slowly back to my apartment. My own life. My own ordinary evening. I set the photograph on my mantelpiece, our living room. Their living room, the fireplace nobody ever changed, the crack in the upper left corner. Our C. SCJPCPCCC 5 sets of initials carved by an 8-year-old who understood instinctively that names outlast circumstances. I thought about my mother standing at that fireplace the first week, deciding without hesitation that these names would stay. She never told us, she never needed to. She just kept her promise quietly and completely for 36 years and trusted that one day we would understand. I understood now. The porch light metaphor stayed with me for weeks afterward. People who leave lights on expect someone might need to find them. My parents had left lights on their whole lives. In every quiet, careful way they knew how. We had just needed to learn how to look. And if your parents had carried a secret their entire lives, not out of shame, but out of love, would you want to know? Or would some truths be better honored by the silence that protected them?